So I'm looking at Genesis 37 today. So as I've said before, during January and in the lead up to the time of Lent, because it'll be Easter before you know it. Has anyone eaten any hot cross buns yet? Yes, I have. I was at Woolies day before Christmas, and they said, "Oh yeah, Saturday is when the hot cross buns are coming out," and they did. Catherine went down and got some for us. So Anthony and I are going to talk about the story of Joseph during January and some February. Joseph and his big dreams from Genesis chapters 37 to 50. And I would encourage you to take time to read from the scriptures Genesis chapters 37 to 50. It's quite a big chunk, but it's quite a page turner actually. And if you have trouble starting, just pick it up and just read. I think it's probably the best way to do that. Joseph's life story marks a time when one small family of 12 brothers and at least one daughter from a man named Jacob start the journey to become a great nation, the ancient nation of Israel, who are called God's cherished people, and they are indeed the gateway to ourselves becoming God's cherished people through our own salvation in Jesus Christ, when God turned his face towards us. Just going to start with a bit of background. I'll try not to put you to sleep straight away, but does anyone know the story of Joseph? Anyone want to? What's something about Joseph, the Old Testament that you recall? I've got all day.
After going through a lot of tribulations, after being sold as a slave by his brothers, he ended up becoming governor of Egypt. That's
right. He had a troubled life that turned out really, really good. It's a great way to summarise it. I don't want to give away too much over the next couple of weeks, but if you read Genesis, those chapters, you'll know it anyway. Jacob, his father, had 4 wives. Two were his proper wives, and 2 were the maidservants of his wives. So Jacob had 12 sons from 4 women. And when I was in year 8, my religious studies teacher, Mr. Judd, said that Jacob was a very busy man, with all those wives and all those children. But it's not the way that Jacob would have planned it. Jacob only wanted to have one wife. Rachel is the wife that he would have been happy to have just had one woman in his life. But things didn't turn out that way, not always because of his own circumstances. But despite that, God, in his wisdom and power, used the circumstances that Jacob found himself in, whether they were circumstances that were put on him or things he got up to himself that didn't turn out too well. God used the circumstances of his life to create a people called Israel, the descendants of whom we still hear about today, do we not? They're in the news even to this day. Now, I do make a distinction between the modern state of Israel and the ancient people of Israel, but there is a lineage there. We still hear about how the Jewish people are both blessed and persecuted, and it's of course through their line that God sent his son Jesus Christ to be the saviour of the world. The key to understanding about Joseph the dreamer is that 1, he was born of Rachel, Jacob's favourite wife, and he had a younger brother, Benjamin, and Rachel actually died giving birth to Benjamin. The second thing to remember is that Joseph was the son of Jacob's old age. Now, Catherine and I didn't start having children until we were 37 and into our 40s, and I wonder if we'd met earlier and had children when we were younger, how different that might have been. Was there a softness and a gentleness that we had in our later years that we might not have had if we'd had children when we were in our 20s? I don't know. You guys might be more qualified to talk about that. And it sounds like Bruce is the expert on it. He's our resident Jacob. So he was the son of, Joseph was the son of Jacob's old age. Joseph had been born when Jacob was struggling still to release himself from, he was in servitude to his greedy uncle called Laban, who was also his father-in-law. So he married his cousins, which is actually legal in Australia, did you know, to marry your cousin? It's a bit icky to me, but it's actually legal. Jacob was struggling to release himself from servitude to Laban. He was also trying to sort out the problems that he had caused himself, as we saw in the video, with his parents and his older brother Esau, whose birthright he had stolen. But Joseph, as he grew up at a time when Jacob was getting on top of his struggles. He'd moved back to the land of Canaan, living in the city of Hebron, where his father Isaac and his grandfather Abraham had lived. And life was going pretty good for Jacob around about the time that his son Joseph was 17 years old. I don't know about you, but sometimes I find myself in a situation where everything's going well and I get suspicious, like, what's around the corner? I don't know if Jacob had that feeling, but he had good reason to, if he did. I'm going to read Genesis 37, verses 1 to 4. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. Those are the two handmaiden wives. And he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any other of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. So unfortunately for Joseph, Genesis 37:3 tells us that Jacob made no secret of the fact that he favoured Joseph more than his any other sons, because it was from his favourite wife Rachel, and his younger brother Benjamin would have been still quite young. Jacob broke a golden rule in families, that you never show preference to any one of the children under your care. If someone was to ask you, those of us who are parents, who was your favourite child, what would you answer? All of them. Yeah, you shouldn't have an answer. You shouldn't say it's this one or that one. It's the old, is it Sophie's Choice, that movie where the lady's got to choose between which one of her children lives and which one dies? Who would want to make that call? Because you're supposed to love your children equally, aren't you? And you're supposed to show that as well. Jacob is the father of all these 12 sons, but today we have lots of blended families, don't we? And blended families go back to time eternal, because we have blended families these days because relationships break down, and then people find new partners, and they reconnect, and they might have their own children each that they bring into a relationship, and then they'll have children of their own. So they have mine, yours, and ours. So blended families. In the past, when mortality rates for people, when people didn't live as long because we didn't have antibiotics or WHS laws, there was blended families have been around forever. So the children that we have should all be treated the same. All the children living under the same roof, and even step-siblings who stay over, should all be treated the same way, with the same level of attention, provision, and discipline. This is probably the biggest thing to take away from this story here in Genesis 37. about the way we should treat our children, and everyone, in fact, should be treated equal. No one child should be treated better or worse, or disciplined more harshly, or disciplined more leniently, or invested in a greater or a different level than others. You shouldn't. You hear of. I went to school with a guy whose brother became an Olympic cyclist, and so he got all the attention. My mate, his brother, was in my class. He was a pretty good cyclist as well. He always lived in the shadow because his brother was the better cyclist. And that really messes with people. So yes, I guess what I'm saying there, stepchildren should be treated the same as biological children. Foster children should be treated the same as biological children. Catherine and I used to work with foster carers, and the kids used to say, I'm not treated the same as the natural kids from that family, and I just want parents that'll love me. Did you know that there's a thing called the Cinderella effect? Statistically, step parents are more likely to cause harm or neglect to children who are not their biological children. Statistically, more children are harmed by their own parents, but because step parents are still quite a small pool, but for the number of step parents that they cause a greater number of harm to the children under their care, because they don't follow the golden rule that you should treat all the people in your family the same way. They say the blood is thicker than water, but family doesn't just mean blood. There was plenty of bad blood in Jacob's household, though, between his sons. And if it was making it bad by treating Joseph special, he made it even worse by making him a special coat. And the Hebrew word for that is a ketonot pasim, which is hard to translate. And so there's a few different ways that this special coat is named. This coat stood out in some way, either because it had long sleeves, or as Donny Osmond sang, it had golden lining and bright colours shining. I'll tell you what, that song's been living rent-free in my head this week. What's the movie or the play that's from? Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat. Yes. Has anyone seen that play? I wouldn't get my theology from it, but it's not bad, is it? Yeah. It's called Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat. Yeah. It's a play by the Phantom of the Opera people, Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice. Yeah. You ever get the chance to go see that play? Go see it, but get your theology from the Bible, not from Lloyd Webber and Rice. But some way this coat stood out. It had long sleeves, it had gold lining, it was ornate. I think of, the Sergeant Pepper Beatles sort of era with all the fancy trimmings. Somehow it stood out in a way that the other sons didn't have a similar coat of many colours. Dolly Parton wrote a song about a coat of many colours that her mother made for her from scraps of cloth when she was growing up dirt poor. She says that her mother sewed the garment as she told her the story about the special coat that Jacob made for Joseph. And when Dolly Parton, this is apparently a true story, she wore this coat of many colours to school, and proudly, but she got laughed at by all the other kids. And she said, this coat was made with my mother's love, and you can never take that away from me. They can take the coat away, but they can't take away a parent's love. Joseph's brothers can't take their father's love away from Joseph, but they do take his coat away, as we'll see later on. Now, Jacob should have known better than to treat his son this way. He probably thought he was doing the right thing by showing his love, but it was actually setting him up for failure, wasn't he? He was turning him into a spoiled brat. And as we saw in the story, Jacob had conspired with his own mother. Jacob's own mother had treated him special, more special than Jacob's brother Esau. And they had conspired together, Jacob and his mother Rebekah, to rob Esau of his birthright. They conspired against their father Isaac and his brother Esau. So he should have known better, but I guess that's what old age love does, hey? It says in Genesis 37:2 that Joseph sent, Jacob, his father, sent Joseph out to basically spy on the other brothers, and he brought them back a bad report. So basically he's a dobber as well. So you can see that Joseph is not endearing himself very well to his brothers. You obviously haven't heard the saying that snitches get stitches. And it says in verse 4 that Joseph's brothers were so jealous and angry that they could not speak a kind word to him. So things are bad enough, but to make matters worse, Joseph starts to have some dreams that get him into trouble. So this is Genesis 37 verses 5 to 8. Joseph had a dream, and when he told to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, where is it? There it is in the middle. Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose up and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered round to mine and bowed down to it. Hey, what better way to get yourself in the good books with your brothers? His brother said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told to his brothers, listen, I had another dream. And this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. I'll just read verse 10 and 11. When he told his father, as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come down and bow down to the earth, the ground before you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in his mind. So Joseph has this dream where his brothers are going to bow down to him. And it builds on this theme in the Bible that the older will serve the younger, and that the proud will be brought down and the humble will be lifted up. And then, in the second dream, his father and whoever his mother is at the time, because his real mother is dead. And the brothers are just crazy jealous. It's just getting out of hand. But notice that Jacob kept the matter in mind. If you remember some of the readings from Christmas, Mary, the mother of Jesus, kept these revelations that she had. She pondered them. And so Jacob has sort of been wise enough as well to think, maybe there's something in all this. It's like he locks it away for the future. But his brothers, by comparison, they are not doing much pondering. They are going crazy with rage. So we look at, where are we going from here? We're going to verse 12. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, as you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I'm going to send you to them. Very well, he said. So he said to him, go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me. Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, what are you looking for? He replied, I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they're grazing their flocks? They have moved on from here, the man answered. I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. He's already travelled 60 kilometres from Hebron to Shechem, and Dothan's another 20 kilometres away. And remember, there's no motor vehicles in that day. But they saw him in the distance, his brothers, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns, and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. When Reuben, he's the oldest brother, heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty, there was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. How nice of them. His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the system and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, the boy isn't there. Where can I turn now? Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, we found this. Examine it to see whether it's your son's robe. He recognized it and said, this is my son's robe. Some ferocious animals devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. No, he said, I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave. So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. Now, I'm just going to summarise that last bit. I'm not going to go through it line by line. So, there are many ways that Joseph could have been spared. If just one thing went differently, like he's wandering around at Shechem and a guy sees him, if that guy hadn't been there, Joseph would have just gone home and said, I didn't find my brothers. So it's almost like it was destined to happen. I'm not sure that Joseph could have avoided the circumstances. And, we often think that we're in control of the events of our lives, but sometimes it's clear that we're not. Especially sometimes we seem like Joseph was, like passengers in the events that happen rather than participants. But thank God that God is ultimately in control of everything. And that's one thing we're going to see in this series, that God is in control of everything. Have you ever thought about killing someone who's annoying? Someone said yes. You can tell us who. Do you want to tell us who? Your kids, wasn't it? I'm sure you wouldn't have really done it. And fortunately for Joseph, Reuben suggests, let's not kill him, let's throw him in a cistern. No, it's Judah, isn't it? Anyway, and what's interesting is that they throw him in the cistern and they sit down to have a meal, because if you're going to kill your brother, don't do it on an empty stomach. It's like an insult, another insult. Like, you just stay there. We're going to come back and kill you, but we're just going to have a feast here, and just to rub it in. The annoying brother Joseph is gone from their lives finally. They sell him to some travelling Ishmaelites. He goes down to Egypt and is sold as a slave to Potiphar, Pharaoh's captain of the guard, probably equivalent to our chief of police. And that should be the end of the matter there. Joseph will live out his days as a slave in Egypt. Jacob will forever mourn the son that he's lost, and his brothers will go back to whatever they're doing that was causing Joseph to dob on them, and they'll just have to live with Joseph's disappearance on their consciences. But that's not the end of the story. In fact, that's just the beginning of the whole story. Because God is at work here through all this process. It seems like just the evil machinations of some jealous brothers and a father who's allowed his favourite son to be spoiled. But God is working through something called his providence to set up in advance a rescue mission for Joseph and for Jacob and the whole family. A natural disaster is going to happen a few years down the track, and God is setting up a rescue mission, as we will see. But at the same time, God is setting up an even bigger rescue mission that's going to be 400 years in the making, when the descendants of Jacob find themselves in slavery in Egypt and they cry out to God, and God raises up a Christ-like figure called Moses. This has all been organised by God years before, in advance, to create this event that is still recognised and celebrated, that the Passover, the escape from Egypt, which was really the foundation story of the nation of Israel. And Charlton Heston did pretty good out of it as well in his 1956 portrayal of Moses in the movie The Ten Commandments. So what looks like a hopeless case is actually God at work behind the scenes. In the next few weeks, we hope to use this story of Joseph's life to show that God is at work in our own lives and in the world, planning rescue missions in advance for problems that haven't even happened yet. You don't have to look too far into the news to get discouraged about the things that are happening in the world. But God is still at work. God is still reigning. God is right now taking into consideration the implications of acts of obedience and disobedience that we haven't even committed yet. God is working it all out. So may we be inspired by Joseph's story to give God the glory for the ways he has made his power and protection clear to us.